Welcome back. If you're looking for another update on the Lanchester, here we are. There is finally an update on the Lanchester. I've actually been recording a lot of the work that we've been doing on the wiring and holding off, hoping that I'd be able to release the whole series in the regular schedule in one nice smooth flow when it was all finished. It is not all finished. It has been a much larger job than I was expecting. I had sort of been led to believe this would be a case of simply remove the old wiring and put the new wiring in place. It hasn't been like that. Simply removing the old wiring has been a chore, in part because a lot of the old wiring isn't old wiring. The car came off the road in 1984, as far as we can tell. And we've been trying to find out why, because overall the car isn't in the sort of condition you would expect it to need to be laid up in 1984. You would have expected it to have either been continued to be used and run to the ground and scrapped. It happens, it was an old car. Or for it to have had some serious malady that would have brought it off the road. The worst we've found is some superficial rust, which that's not a reason really to take it off the road. The brakes are poor, but they're mechanical brakes. The car's been laid up a very long time, so we don't think that was the reason. The engine runs fine, and everything in the car worked except for the horns, which are broken. There'll be more on that in the future. So why did the car come off the road? Well, we think it was the wiring. Because, as you'll see in this video, somebody has made a concerted effort to actually repair the wiring and get the car working again. However, they've spliced into the original 70-odd-year-old wiring, which is literally falling apart in places. And especially where new wiring joins old wiring, that seems to be where most of the problems are. And we've gone from a car that worked to a car where the electrical items have been gradually breaking down and becoming intermittent. And in some cases, like the rear lights, not working at all. So we decided it was sensible to put a new wiring loom in. We could have built one from scratch ourselves, but Pat and I are completely new to this side of electrical work on cars. We've done a little bit of audio work, we've done a little bit of repair work here and there, but nothing on this scale. So we didn't want to risk building our own loom and making some potentially expensive mistakes. And when we found out that Autosparks make a loom off the shelf, which is exactly what was fitted to the car, just made of modern materials, yes, it's a little expensive, but it saves us a lot of work and it takes a lot of the guessing out. So that's the route that we've decided to go. We'll come to that in later videos. This video is dealing with the removal of the wiring and understanding what the repairs were. We wanted to put out some information that would help people understand the job, not just from a wiring diagram's point of view, because a lot of people, ourselves included, are learning as we go, and a wiring diagram, it tells you a bit. It tells you how the system should work. It tells you how the wiring should be. But our wiring isn't like the wiring diagram. Somebody's been in there before. We've made the cardinal error of taking on somebody else's project, and you should never ever do that. I'll probably do it again in the future, I never learn. So this video is covering more of a real world wiring situation. This is learning as you go, this is how it is. But it will also be where the wiring actually goes in the car. The hardest information to find has been, how does the wiring physically route through the car? Anybody could tell me this is what your wiring does and this is where it goes. But when it came to actually saying, well, where does the main front to back line run? How does the wiring get to the semaphores? That sort of information just wasn't available. So this video, I'm aiming to correct that. I'm aiming to get some information out there for people most cars of this period and construction type have a very similar wiring route and a very similar wiring layout. So hopefully, if you're dealing with a project like this, or thinking of dealing with a project like this short series of wiring videos will actually help you understand the project you're undertaking. You'll be able to learn from my mistakes, which will make things a lot less frustrating. And yeah, you will see some mistakes along the way, I am sure, and those of you with some experience at these jobs, please don't be too cross with the mistakes I make. I do make it better later. It just takes a while to learn when you're learning as you go. Anyway, that's quite enough from me, so let's get into the video and you can see the first part of this big adventure. I'm having a quick look, now that we've got a bit of a break in the weather, at how to deal with the wiring in this car. I've taken the front seats out just to make it a bit easier to get in here. You can see there's quite a lot of new wiring being done in the past. It's not been done badly, but everything it's splicing into, you know, you've got the old cloth wax type wiring, and every junction is like this. It's not the worst it could be, but it's not great, and whenever you do anything with these old wires, they're very brittle and very fragile. Now, we have one advantage in that this car doesn't seem to have ever been upgraded with indicators or a radio or any extra bits and bobs. So in theory, all of this new wiring in here should just be a direct replacement of the old wiring. In theory. In the engine bay, you can see just about the wiring that goes around the steering column there. And it gets a little bit interesting up at the bulkhead. From what I gather, up on this little shelf here, there should be a block, either a fuse block or, you know, something a bit like this, but like for connecting wires together. Sorry, I don't know the proper term. So you would have the wires run from here to a thing on this little shelf and then down to the rest of the wiring loom. But what looks like's happened here is you've got the old wiring running up and it goes into this block. Some old wiring comes out to rejoin the rest of the existing loom, and some is new replacement wires. Some of it comes up here, some of it goes in the car. I don't really know how this is supposed to look or where it's supposed to go, so I'm flying a little bit blind on that. Now, it's worth noting that we have had everything working on this car. Shortly after we got it and got it running, we have had every electrical item working on this car, so we know, at least from that point, that this wiring is probably correct, that the electrical components, what there are on this car, are probably okay, and that putting the new wiring loom in is probably going to fix all the weird intermittent problems we've got, like the back lights now don't work, the headlights and the side lights on the front, they work when they feel like it. Semaphores don't work now. Whether that's because of something we've disconnected or whether that's because of a fault in the wiring, we don't know, so we have a solution. The solution is this lot. We ordered a brand new wiring loom. You can't remember the company name, so I'm going to put it on the screen here. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with any sort of instructions. Nothing's labelled. There's no printed diagram to show me even roughly what things are supposed to be. The only things that are labelled in here are the extras that we got. So, like, for example, that's the right-hand flasher, because we're going to be putting some stealth lighting in this car. So, from the outside it will look just as it does now, but we're going to have some indicators that you see when they come on, and that sort of thing. So with the exception of just these couple of tags on here, nothing else is labelled.
So what I'm trying to do at the moment, it's not particularly exciting to film, which is why I'm not. I'm trying to go through what I can see in the car without disconnecting anything, and just seeing if I can match up what I can see in the car with these sections I've got here laid out. In trying to understand the wiring loom, I've got myself even more confused. I thought I could lay it out, match up bullet connectors, figure out what goes where, and I can't. So I'm going to go with the other plan, which is a bit more practical, a bit more hands-on. I've had a look in the car itself, and most of the wiring comes through from this area here. Now I think I know which is the wiring loom for this section, because one of the wiring loom pieces is much more complicated and much more bulky than the rest, and I'm pretty sure that's the bit that goes behind the dashboard and comes through here. The only other bit of wiring that comes into the car is this one here, and that goes down to the oil pressure switch on the oil filter housing and the coil down here where that little blue spade connector is. Again, I think I know which one that is, but there's a couple of candidates, so I'm not 100% sure. So what I'm thinking is, if I take this area and disconnect it, pull that through into the car, I've drawn a little diagram. Now I know this isn't a wiring diagram properly, this is, I'm drawing what I can see, and I've used colours so I can understand it a bit better, and of course I've also taken pictures of what's here, so hopefully when I take that all through into the inside of the car, I can label as I go, and I've got enough reference material for me to understand, which is the important thing here, and I can always redraw this in a bit and have a better example of this diagram than what's visible here. So that will be the next thing I do. First stage on trying to figure this out. What I've done with these connectors here, I'm referring to this as VR, voltage regulator, and then I've numbered each of these connections 1 to 9 at the bottom. The ones that are still connected here are the ones that go down to either that block or this wiring loom that runs along the column. So the only ones I've disconnected are the ones that go through the grommet there into the car. And for each one of those I've put a label on so I know where it goes on this block here. That should help me decipher it in a bit, I think. You can see the hole just there, that's where the wiring comes through, and on each of the end of these is just a little label so I know what each one's for. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to unthread these wires from the loom. This one, as I unthreaded it, just fell off, and I think that one goes to the instrument panel, but I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, I'm going to keep these together once I've unthreaded them and figured out where they actually go, and we'll see what we're left with once I've got that out. Looking a little bit tidier under here already. All I've done is all of the cables that are just labelled, I unthreaded. I've kept these bundled together since I disconnected them all together at the same time, and I know these all go to the same point, so in my head it makes sense to keep them together. These two red wires go up to the wiring loom there. This brown wire I think goes to the ignition switch. A little bit tight under the dashboard. So I'm going to double check what's at the other end of this section, disconnect what's in the engine bay, label it obviously, and bring that through into the car. And then I can find out what this brown wire is actually connected to, label that, and bring that out. And then that's one section of the wiring loom, as is in the car at the moment, dealt with. And I've got all my labels that you can't really see because of overexposure. That's those two disconnected. Had to take the eyelets off the end to get them through this P-clip here, because to get that P-clip undone I've got to take the fuel filter off. To get the fuel filter off I need a second pair of hands inside the car, because when a previous owner fitted this, these bolts don't go into captive nuts and my arms aren't long enough to reach this and the nut on the other side. And it's too high up to use a spanner to stop it from spinning. So it was just easier, since we're replacing the wiring anyway, pull the eyelets off, remove the manky grommet, do it that way. So that's some of the really horrible looking wiring out there. And when it comes into the car, it comes through this bottom hole, goes underneath this insulating board here, up into a clip there which I need to unbolt, and then down. And this is the wiring I've already pulled out. But there is a little tail, where are we? Just there. That goes into the back of the wiper motor. That's one of the wiper motor bolts. That bolt is missing, and the wiper motor needs to be taken apart to be cleaned and re-greased anyway, so I'm going to do all that together now. I won't be able to film this because where I'm holding the camera is exactly where my head needs to be. I'll show you when I've done. A little bit more progress and a problem. A little bit more progress is I found this brown wire actually goes into a bullet connector which disappears up right underneath the top of the dashboard, up there somewhere, and it seems to be to do with the wiper motors. So I'm not sure how to do anything about that, but this wire actually looks in pretty good shape compared to a lot of the others, so hopefully this one we don't need to worry about. In the engine bay we've got the wiper motor which sits here. We've got that off, and there are two screws in the end here. Now it looks like I didn't actually have to take this off, but I couldn't tell whether the wires were going behind the wiper motor and connecting in the back or just connecting there. And there are missing fixings anyway that need addressing. So once you've undone the two nuts, or in my case the one, because only the top one was still there, the bottom one had gone, it just slides out of this rod here and then you're good to go. But as I was wiggling everything around up there, there's this rubber thing that connects this rod to the rod that goes into the wiper motor, and this little bit of metal fell off, and then I found the ends of the split pin which is sheared, so I'm going to have to reinstate that, but I'm not sure exactly what's going on. So I assume that rubber bung thing is supposed to be there, but I literally can't get in to see what I'm supposed to be seeing on it. I'm guessing I need to put a new split pin in, connect it up and hope for the best, but that's a bit of a nuisance. But once I've got those two wires disconnected, you can see they go up through this hole. Now we've got some light coming in. They go up through here, and that's the bolt hole for the wiper, that's the other one. The wiring goes through there, so I can unscrew that, and then this whole section is ready to come out. That's the first section of wiring out, and let me tell you, I am so happy I put this carpet down in here. It has made it a much more pleasant job, as pleasant as these jobs can ever be. It does look a lot better underneath there now. It looks a lot clearer. I feel like I can see what I'm doing a bit better now. So I'm going to have a look at what I've pulled out. This section I think is what goes underneath the dashboard. So what I've pulled out may marry up to some of this. The reason for me thinking this bit goes underneath the dash, these are the bulb sockets that go into the back of the cluster, and this is just a lot of wiring. There's a lot of things coming off, much more than the other sections, and that marries up with the fact that underneath the dashboard there's a lot of things. I think these are related to the ignition switch. When I've gone through everything I'll figure it out and I'll know what goes where, but yeah. this is what I've pulled out. And you can see, and when it's in the car it all just looks brown. You can see it used to have colours on it. They've all faded and yellowed over time, but it's not too clever looking. These are bullet connectors, these black things. And some of them have gone quite swollen. Some of them look alright. But like, this is the wiring for the coil and the oil pressure sender, and it's in really bad shape. And this on the end is really brittle. And that's kind of what all the wiring's like in the car. So that's why we've opted to replace it with a new Loom. This newer work's not bad. The wire seems a nice quality, it's still very flexible, but it's the fact that it's just sort of, it's piggybacks onto the old stuff, so wherever it meets it's a problem. Right, I'm going to have to figure out what everything else is. Well, that was the job. The heater, which is what you see there, it's not too bad to remove. There's 3 bolts, here, here and here, and they go through the bulkhead. And they're fairly easy to get to from the other side in the engine bay. A little bit fiddly, but not terrible. Then you have your inlet and outlet on the pipes. And the reason I've removed the heater box is twofold. The first is I could see some wires going up behind it, which are the ones for the heater box itself, but I couldn't see how they were connected and what I needed to disconnect. So it made sense to me to pull that out. The other is we know it leaks, and since we're getting the radiator done, might as well get the heater done at the same time if we can. Although I'm not expecting this to be a cheap or easy unit to fix because it's a bit weird with it not being a flat thing. So I think all I have to disconnect here really is 2 bullet connectors here, which obviously I'll label, and then 1 wire there. The rest of the wiring in here seems to go to that button and the earth point just there. And that means I've got to just wiggle it around this trim panel. So I think I've got, with the exception of the wires still attached to the dashboard, I think I've got most of this section out now, if not all, and that should help me line that up with what I've got on the new wiring loom. The only problem is the weather's closing in, so I'm going to have to pack up for now. I'm going to finish getting this out, tidy everything away, and I'll have to come back to it on another day. Let's strip the next bit out on this. What I'm aiming to do is disconnect the rest of the items from this block, and then we're going to work out where the wiring loom actually runs. I know it runs down the column, down to the steering box down there, and then it branches off up for the headlights under the wing, back for the generator, which is this jobby here. I think it also goes down to the starter motor from this one as well. I'll know better in a minute. I'll be disconnecting some of the items from up here on the voltage regulator. I do have a copy of the wiring loom for this car, and it looks as though the reason things like the interior light don't work is there's no wiring running to it. So it's quite likely the old wiring is still in the car, but probably around about the B pillar it's been snipped through, deemed non-essential, and then just not rewired back in. The other thing I've noticed is that the wiring that is here doesn't match the wiring diagram. And this is where all the repairs are, and this is, you know, it goes down here. I don't really know what's going on, so until I've got all this apart and laid out, I won't know how things are supposed to go. If you look just in here, you can see that one there, that's the main wiring loom, and that kind of loops around a few bits here. And some of the wiring goes up through this wing brace into the headlights, and some of it goes back to the other side of the car under the radiator, and then kicks up again for the lights on the other side. There we go, underneath the car. This is the radiator support section, and this is the wiring loom here. Now, I had already removed some wires from this that weren't connected to anything at either end, so I didn't know where they were supposed to go, and I think again that's part of this rewire in the bright coloured wires. I think it was something to do with that. So my first job is I'm going to disconnect the wiring from the side lights and the headlights at the front, and we'll pull it through and see how that unpicks. I'm going to start off by disconnecting up at the light end. And for the side lights, there is just one screw in the top of the bezel. Which allows you to pop that out. Go. And you just twist that free. It's just like a twist socket, and then you can get to your bulb and everything. Bayonet bulbs on here. As you can see, the red wire here is soldered in to the holder. I'm probably going to have to unsolder that just to get that out. This copper wire loop, that seems to be an owner modification just to get this to earth. I think there should be a little tab that connects, and it's missing. Right, let me show you this again. So on the top you've got a little screw there, so when you unscrew that you can take the bezel off, and you can see the bulb there. A little bit more awkward to get to than usual. Inside you've got this wire which is soldered on inside here that I'll have to desolder, and a previous owner has put in this copper wire which goes around here and is serving as an earth. Now, as far as I'm aware, there should be a little tab that connects to here and they snap off, which is probably why this copper wire exists instead. So you just twist. Hang on, I can't do this one-handed. Right, you've got a little slot here and a wire pushes through that, so when you want to open this up, twist that round and it just comes off. Make sure you don't drop this, it is glass, you don't want to break it. And then you can remove the bulb, which is just a bayonet fit. For the headlight, there is a piece under here, and you're supposed to be able to just move this piece and then the whole bezel comes off. So you pull this piece, you pull it forwards out of its socket, it's sprung, and then release it, and you should be able to just pop this off, but I found it works better if you just find a spot. Literally with a screwdriver, there's usually one somewhere. There we go. A little bit awkward. See, once you've convinced that to come off, you have a rubber seal to keep the water out. This one's still in pretty good condition actually. And there's several connectors. So this one serves as the ground from this point inside the bowl, and then you have two feeds. This one's a replacement wire, this one is an original wire with a replacement connector. They're all bullet connectors, so they literally just pull out, which is great. So all you do to disconnect this piece is you quite literally pull the bullet connectors out, and that frees up your headlight. And just to make sure I don't get things confused, I don't need to label this wire because this one's connected to the headlight bowl, so that stays put. And these I can feed back through and then pull them out from underneath the wing. So when we're underneath the wing here, that's the wiring that comes from the headlight, and I can just feed those through, bring them into the inner arch. Makes it a bit easier to deal with. The wire here is for the side light. Oh, that's handy, it's got a little join there. So what I'll do, rather than desoldering that outside, I'll snip this wire here and label it, and then I can desolder that connector when I'm indoors and get the new one on properly. Once this side is disconnected, I should be able to feed all of these wires across to the other side of the car, repeat all of this, and then work my way up the steering column and back towards the steering wheel.
And don't forget, if you leave some comments and press the like button and subscribe and all that good stuff, that lets me know that I should keep putting this information out there and that you're enjoying it. And it also helps other people find the information if they need it.